Prince Avalanche. Did you have trouble with that title?
The title was actually, I think I had the title before I had the movie. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, but I thought it was a really cool way to put words on a poster that I would like.
Did you have to crowbar a reference to? I can't even remember.
There's a moment where they say their names at the same time, Alvin and Lance, and it sounds like Avalanche.
Do you find it tricky to talk about the movie at all? Because, this is a movie I would think a lot of American audiences would reference as having European vibe to it.
Well, I find it hard to talk about any movie that I've made because I kind of feel like I don't know. I'm a very introverted, not public speaker, and I think that movies kind of speak for themselves for the most part. Sometimes.
But you have to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, but you got to promote the movie and publicize it, get
Sure.
the word out, and hopefully people hear the nonsensical mutterings and stumblings that I have to say and think, well, maybe there's something within there worth going to watch visually realized.
Yeah. I think if you say, like, for instance, this is a Paul Rudd comedy, for instance, that really wouldn't be...
That's not accurate.
No, not at all. But people would like that to be the way...
Or describe it as an Emile Hirsch drama.
Right. Yeah.
But I do really feel like this movie, for me anyway, it represents kind of the blending of the two careers I've had. One, a very independent-minded, dramatic phase of my career, and another, a broader sense of more commercial comedic work. And this, I think, has an appeal to both of those audiences. People that liked, the very small, modest audience that liked a film like All the Real Girls.
Sure.
I think will find value in the emotional and romantic aspects of this film. And actually, a guy came up to me the other day and said, "This is the best stoner film I've seen since Pineapple Express," which is odd since there's no marijuana in the movie. But
isn't a stoner movie the type of movie that is perfect when you're stoned?
Well, that's what
his interpretation.
Like, I can't wait to get high and watch it. He's like, I watched it sober the first time, and now me and my friends will laugh at all the strange little weird elements in the background.
Yeah.
Once we're under the influence, and I thought that was kind of a modest compliment as well.
Yeah, no, it is totally. I could see it. There's a lot of texture in this movie, and and then there's, I guess, the familiar tropes of bromance. That's right. It didn't sound even good coming out of my mouth, but you know what I mean. It's not a road movie by any stretch, but it has that odd couple aspect to it, and how they, of course, come to figure out a way of communicating together and finding a friendship.
Yeah, I think we do take things that are in the broad stroke, recognized as cliche, kind of an odd couple dynamic and two guys on the road, but we brought a sense of absurdity and a sense of emotional perspective to it. At least that was the goal. More than most traditional commercial films out there right now. Our influences were looking to like old Wim Wenders movies or early Jim Jarmusch films or Aki Kaurismäki, and thinking of things a little left to center and more specific to our immediate sensibilities that I think are at least subtly enough woven in there where people can relate to them. There's a sense of honesty tucked into the absurdity and vice versa.
There's also a real sense of like place and location, and there's a lot of also just space in those movies you were just referencing. There's a pace to it, and there's moments of quiet.
Itself a little bit, and the background becomes a character.
Yeah.
There's meditative moments in the movie where the characters are reflecting, or the audience gets a chance to reflect, listen to good music, and sit back and enjoy the visual experience as well. Tim Moore is my director of photography on the movie, and we really set out to make a movie that was visually splendid and engaging, not falling into kind of the low budget indie trappings of just run and gun filmmaking, but considered not only Mother Nature in her art direction, but also the sun as it falls and lighting that would be pleasing to take this experience with.
Mm-hmm. Right. The whole thing takes place in the park, right, which is recovering after forest fires have burned down a tremendous amount of that area, right? And then it starts going through a rebirth of sorts. Was the whole film shot there? I can't remember if there's any part of it that wasn't.
No, the whole shot was filmed in and around Bastrop, which was a region of central Texas that was devastated by a wildfire a few months before. And so we're kind of acknowledging a historical fire. The movie takes place in the 80s, and we're kind of relocating it in time and in place to utilizing the period setting, but shooting it.
There's this, what might be considered a surrealish mini documentary, which is fantastic. You get caught up with this woman who lost her home.
Yeah, one of the beauties of a movie of this low profile is that you can take those opportunities. And when we were location scouting for the movie, we met Joyce, who is a woman that's in the film. She's going through the ashes of her home looking for her pilot's license, and in reality she was going through her ashes of her home looking for her pilot's license. So it's kind of fun to be able to integrate a realistic scenario of this woman that had literally been affected, devastated by this fire, and lost everything in her home. And we worked her into the film and shot this film that was very emotionally stunning, and thought what an amazing opportunity just to expand that into a character. And she was just had this very beautiful vulnerability about her, and was willing to share her story and appear in her movie. And
obviously she knew that this was not like a documentary crew coming down there, so it was like she really...
Sure, what she thought.
Okay. Fair enough, but she was so open to being in that moment and that not opportunity, but that experience, which most anybody else, you wouldn't blame them if they just were like.
Speaking with her in hindsight, she's seen the film now, and she's.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
A pivotal point in her emotional recovery from that is having someone that was asking questions and interested in listening to her story, and I think just going from what was probably a very emotionally repressed sense of frustration that she was going through at the time, I think there was a great liberation in exercising that, dancing around with the camera on us.
Yeah. So I have not seen Either Way, which is what your film is based on, loosely, I assume. I read also it tapped into your frame of mind as you were either coming out of your last film or where you were at in creating a new story, of the simplicity of it. Yeah, right, and kind of scaling down.
It was an opportunity to kind of strip away a lot of the logistics and frustrations and expectations of bigger movies, higher profile movies, more commercially minded movies, and make something that did have a sense of raw integrity to it that we could make as weird as we want because it cost very little money and it wasn't something that depended on like the masses showing up opening weekend. It was something that I could make very personally as an expression of myself and know that there would be enough people that would respond to that to make it financially responsible.
Yeah. It makes me think about how there are still some filmmakers from like the 60s, 70s, wherever, 80s, and that no matter how old I get, and I keep going through their film, there's always another one or two of these little charming films that are small that maybe at the time when they came out were not even that critically, favored and maybe not seen by tremendous number of people, but you go back and of course they have the charm of they were just efforts from the filmmaker. It seems like that would be something I'd be very proud to leave behind, like a legacy of those types of films as well as popular.
I think there's a lot of illustrations of that over the years of the kind of the smaller, lesser known films from somebody that has a distinguished body of work, but I still have great aspirations that this movie will connect and speak to a lot of people, and word of mouth. Traditionally my movies don't come out and blow the doors off any box office, but word of mouth, and as people know the movies and tell their friends about the movies, and they do have kind of a nice life. Some of my films don't find their life until a few years later, and sometimes that's frustrating when you go through the circus of promotion and you don't
it's not
get the film that you want, but
right.
Later you find the audience that did respond, and maybe it took a while to get them out of bed and rattle their cage to come and check it out. But I feel very fortunate to work in an industry where I can make things that are either personal statements or a sense of pleasure or whatever reason I'm motivated to make something, and to be able to have the opportunity to share that with people. Sometimes that's in a international film festival. Sometimes it's at a multiplex in a strip mall somewhere, or sometimes it's at home video on demand and iTunes. People can watch have their film going experience as intimately as they want these days, and it's great to be able to have that kind of broad range of venues.
It sounds like from the times we've talked, I think I interviewed him once before over the phone, but after the sitter, I think it sounds like you see a lot of movies and a lot of different kinds of movies.
I do, and I like a lot of different kinds of movies. I always have.
Yeah. And so what's your favorite way to see them then, or maybe you don't have one?
My favorite way is obviously with an audience. I like,
Yeah.
I like to see an opening night with a very enthusiastic crowd and really give the energy and momentum of a movie, go and experience that social charisma that I think can be very valuable. And I actually like, even a bad movie, seeing that with an audience, that you can really feel that energy in a room, or a movie that makes people uncomfortable. I'll never forget the first time I saw Welcome to the Dollhouse in the theater, and people were squirming, and some people were trying not to laugh at some of the things that were inappropriate, but
or just didn't get it and were laughing regardless. Yeah,
or just uncomfortable and walk out of the movie theater.
Yeah,
happiness the same way. I like filmmakers that can challenge an audience, and I like an audience that's present for that challenge.
I had that experience in the mid '80s, I guess. When did Blue Velvet come out? In '86. That sounds about right. And went to a theater it was in Queens actually. And I was sitting there and with an audience that wasn't really getting it because they were kind of laughing uncomfortably, as you described, but in the wrong place. I was just kind of getting furious because I was undergoing this, spiritual change in my life watching this movie. I had not seen, anything by Lynch before. So for me, I was watching this and I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And I actually left because people were just sort of laughing at the movie, like they were thinking it was ridiculous and stupid.
I had an experience with Wild at Heart in like 1990.
That's bizarre.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Did you walk out?
It was in a crowd in Dallas, and it was very uncomfortable. And they were, as much as I talk about challenging audience, I think at that point in my life it was like a movie that I really loved, and I was getting mad.
Yeah.
So I left and went back to Salt Lake.
That's what I did. It's the exact same thing. I went back and I went to see it by myself, and it was like profound. And you mentioned Jarmusch, and this is me hogging the interview at the moment, but I was living in Boston for a short time, and I went to see Alan Randolph, who was like Altman's Rudolph. Thank you, Alan Rudolph, exactly. And I thought I was going into his movie. I think it was Choose Me, or one of those. And I may have the title wrong. It was one of these art house multiplexes they have, and I walked into the wrong theater, but I didn't really know what to expect. So I sat down, and it already had started. I thought I was a few minutes late, and I'm watching it, and it's black and white, and every minute or two, there's this end of the scene, and it blacks out, and then it's picks up, and it turns out, of course, I was sitting in Stranger Than Paradise, but I didn't know. But I had that moment of being blown away. Those two films specifically, I think Blue Velvet, and they were roughly in the same time frame, but amazing stuff.
Yeah, I think that was the late 80s and early 90s, which is a pretty monumental wave of independent film in terms of my taste. And that was a point in my life where I was being exposed to things outside of the traditional hit box office, in my early teenage years. And
as young as that?
Excited about it, yeah.
Where were you growing up then at that time?
Dallas.
In Dallas, right. You mentioned that. And
theaters, I remember going to see Barton Fink for the first time at the Inwood Theater, or Naked Lunch at the Cine.
I love that. Oh God, I love that movie.
Really great experiences.
Yeah. And how old were you, I guess, roughly, when you were starting to see those?
75, so that was my early high school years, starting 89, when Do the Right Thing, and as a video came out that summer, it was pretty amazing. It was a little year.
Right.
And then I remember that film Suture came out, and there was a movie called Squeeze that meant a lot to me at the time. And Kids came out and kind of was a radical hammer to the head.
Mm-hmm. Do you owe your decision to make movies to that specifically, maybe that period of time when you were exposed to those films?
I think so. I had this weird experience when I was 12, and I was a background actor in that movie, Born on the 4th of July.
Were you?
So they were filming that in Dallas, and I'm actually, if you watch the first 3 minutes of that movie, I looked right into the camera and wiggled my eyebrows. For some reason, it's in the movie.
I think it's the first thing they tell you when you're going to be in a movie, right? Don't look at the camera, memorize,
And I just was like, wow.
Couldn't help yourself.
It's like a baseball game, and I run up to the backstop and wiggle my eyebrows with the young Ronnie Kovic's girlfriend. It's pretty funny. But I was watching Oliver Stone and Robert Richardson work that day. And I was a savvy enough guy to know who they were. And I was 12.
Sure.
But I was a huge movie buff. And was just watching them in action on the first movie set I was ever on, and thought, well, this is amazing. I need to do this for a living. And it's funny, I've since worked with the assistant director on that movie, and people that have I've referenced that, and they say, "Oh, I was there. That's funny that I was working with a 12-year-old version of you." And
You're right. You probably look pretty much the same.
6 more facial hairs.
So, have you seen or met Oliver Stone
But I would
since?
point to that scene, and he's got to have had a moment in the editing room. It was like,
Sure.
This kid staring into the lens, but it's the shot of the girl that I need.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy actually who's still committed to making movies that are not so mainstream. I mean, he obviously does the Wall Street too.
Yeah, he's had an amazing career, a really diverse body of work. It's really amazing.
Yeah. So Prince Avalanche, Paul Rudd, Emile Hirsch, that can help because with some of the other challenging aspects of this movie, which I only mean in the sense that it may not be conventional by popular.
Right. It's weird. It's a rated R movie, but there's no profanity, violence, nudity, sex, or drug abuse in the movie.
Well, we still like the movie, though. No, I know you're making another point. So, yeah, what about that?
A summer where zombies are getting slashed and decapitated, and everything is PG-13 and suitable for all audiences, other than the massive gore and catastrophes. It's so funny to have a movie about 2 guys talking. None of them. I mean, there's not even a swear word in the movie.
I guess there are references to I don't even remember female body parts and
Ultimately about relationships.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, exactly. That's not for kids.
Right.
They need to see cartoons, and
It's very frustrating. But
that is bizarre. That must have been a big deal then, right?
it's frustrating for me because I think people would enjoy this movie and get a lot out of the experience.
Yeah.
Hopefully, those guidelines aren't too closely followed these days anyway.
It's interesting because I remember, you made me think a lot when I talked to you about childhood and seeing film movies. And I have a kid now; he's 9, and there's always a Despicable Me 2, and there's something every week basically to take him to. But when I was a kid, and probably you too, we didn't have quite so many options. There was occasionally the Disney film or Herbie the Love Bug. Yeah,
Herbie Goes Bananas is the best one.
We had that once in a while, but we didn't have quite the amount of children-geared films. The movies I saw were basically made for adult people, and we just kind of happened to see it. And Prince Avalanche kind of puts me in that frame of mind. I probably would have been, what am I watching? But at the same time, it would have been like, but it's a story, and I dig it,
But also, there were great movies that were suitable for children that were adult-minded, like Never Cry Wolf and Black Stallion, and movies that were not
for everybody,
down to kids,
yeah,
for everybody. And I think those were really monumental experiences for me.
I wonder what the difference is. Now they make films with references that adults can enjoy, and that's supposed to sustain an adult's attention rather than them being on their phone during the movie. Yeah, exactly. But as opposed to actually making the subtext.
Yeah, there's some good ones though.
Yeah, there are.
Occasionally there's just like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid or something. Those are fun to watch. Airplane movies anyway. I don't know. Sometimes I'm a little bit more lenient when I'm on an airplane, but I watched The Croods yesterday. That was really fun.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot.
But let's plug the film properly. It's going to be coming out theatrically.
Theatrically on iTunes and video on demand on August 9th. Mm-hmm. And then, that's in about 15 cities, and then open it up over the next few weeks.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And then wide.
And then wide. Yeah, all these blockbuster summer movies, you have to look out because here we come.
Yeah, exactly. Neither Paul nor Emile wears either a cape or cowl.
No, but they do wear really cool overalls and helmets.
Yes, they do. Do they insist on keeping their overalls?
They wear them every day. It's like a fashion statement.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of dudes strutting around now. They're like trying to
bring back the overall.
Yeah, they're trying to ride our style.
One thing I was curious before we call it a day, and that was the inspiration was initially from a GM commercial you made.
A Dodge commercial.
Dodge, excuse me. How did that?
Those are two different conversations. There's a Chrysler commercial that I had done.
Okay, that's maybe what I'm wrong.
The process was very inspiring. And then when I did the Dodge commercial, I met Lance Legal, who plays the old truck driver man.
Right.
So, a lot of my commercial work is feeding into the feature work that I do. Mm-hmm. There's starting to kind of be a blurry line of enthusiasm I have for both art forms, and they're definitely educating and shaking hands with the other.
Right. You don't go out of your way to separate those two things, obviously. You allow the influences to kind of be mutual.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Ongoing adventure of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen it a couple of times. I enjoyed it, and I hope everybody sees it, And yeah. And then you move on. We didn't even get to talk about Joe. But it's going to have its world premiere at the Toronto Film Festival?
Venice.
Excuse me.
Doho, and then Toronto.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that looks. I would have a lot of questions about working with Nicolas Cage.
You gonna be in Toronto?
I think I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to be there.
Well, hopefully you get a chance to see the movie.
I will see the movie. I think it's
Hell yes.
in the first one I so far know I'm going to see. How's that? Nicolas Cage. What was that experience like? And
he's a magical man. It's a very restrained performance. It's unlike any movie he's done, and I'm very passionate about it. I think it turned out to be a really tremendous role for him as a tree poisoner, and just very brave. Fearless actor that would bring a lot of ideas to the table. And some days he'd use a venomous cottonmouth snake as a prop. Just a really guy that will go for it and do what it takes to make the character feel honest and give the director what he's really looking for.
That'd be awesome. Well, thanks very much, and come back.
It was a pleasure.
Please come back on, and let's do this again, maybe around the time of Joe.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Talk to you.
Same here.